Griselda Blanco, the godmother.
She decided to stop being the victim and become the victimizer.
Escobar, cartels, ruthless violence. That is the usual image of the drug trade. But Griselda Blanco, the Black Widow,
she gained the nickname of the Black Widow because she had to prove her stature, she had to prove her ruthlessness.
defied expectations. Born in Medellin's slums, she clawed her way to become a cocaine queenpin, wielding power in a man's world. How did she achieve this? And what led to her eventual downfall? The rise and fall of the Black Widow is a story unlike any other. Griselda Blanco's childhood. On February 15, 1943, the world was a chaotic place. Nazi Germany was wreaking havoc across Europe, and the ripples of war were felt even in Colombia. It was on this day that Griselda Blanco Restrepo entered the world in Cartagena, a city on Colombia's Caribbean coast. However, Griselda's own life would be far from idyllic. Her father vanished from the picture early on, leaving her to be raised by her mother, Ana Restrepo. Ana, struggling to make ends meet, relocated to Medellin with a young Griselda. Medellin, at the time, was a harsh place. The city was filled with poverty, violence, and a sense of desperation. Shanty towns, like the one where Griselda lived with her mother, became breeding grounds for crime. The murder rate was so high that children reportedly played morbid games, digging makeshift graves in the dirt to mimic the constant presence of death around them. Ana, battling her own demons with alcohol, struggled to provide for and protect her daughter. Accounts suggest she turned to prostitution to survive. It was in this environment that Griselda's own capacity for violence began to take root. At a shockingly young age, 11 according to some reports, Griselda was allegedly involved in a horrific kidnapping. Along with others, she kidnapped a 10-year-old boy from a wealthy family. It was a desperate attempt to secure ransom money, but things didn't go as planned. The family refused to pay the money. In a shocking display of cold-bloodedness, Griselda was handed a gun. What happened next would forever scar her and solidify the path of violence that would define her future. She reportedly shot the young boy at point-blank range, the bullet piercing his eyes. This act of brutality at such a young age revealed a darkness within Griselda that foreshadowed the ruthlessness she would become known for in the years to come. Love, crime, and betrayal. At the age of 19, Griselda ran away from home. The reason for this drastic step was that she had been a victim of abuse at the hands of her mother's boyfriend. Now on the tough streets, she had to find a way to survive, so she resorted to petty theft and also fell into prostitution. It was on these unforgiving streets that Griselda met Carlos Trujillo. Trujillo was a heavy drinker and a small-time criminal, scraping by with document forgeries. They understood each other's struggles and became partners in crime. Their first business together was selling marijuana in Colombia. Despite the dangers, it offered a semblance of stability, a way to keep their heads above water. Their partnership soon blossomed into a personal connection, and Griselda and Trujillo were married. The relationship produced 3 sons, Dixon, Uber, and Osvaldo, who were all born before Griselda reached the age of 21. However, by 1964, the once strong bond between Griselda and Trujillo crumbled in the face of a business disagreement. The details remain murky, but the argument turned deadly, with Griselda reportedly ordering Trujillo's execution. This ruthless act marked a turning point in Blanco's life. She had become more than a petty criminal on the streets of Medellin. She was a woman capable of cold-blooded violence, a woman who wouldn't hesitate to eliminate those who stood in her way. With Trujillo gone, Griselda secured fake identification and assumed a new name. This new identity became her shield as she entered the United States illegally. When she landed in Queens, New York, she wasn't alone. She brought her 3 sons and a new husband with her. His name was Alberto Bravo, and he was a cocaine smuggler. Little did anyone know, this seemingly ordinary family settling into Queens was about to embark on a journey that would make Griselda Blanco a name synonymous with violence and power in the drug underworld. Beyond borders. Griselda, with her new husband by her side, wasn't content with small-time marijuana dealing. They craved a bigger piece of the pie and saw a golden opportunity in cocaine. Back then, in 1960s New York, cocaine wasn't the glamorous white powder it would become later. It was a cheap, low-grade paste called basuco, or bazooka, with a limited market. But Griselda had a nose for trends. As the decade progressed and cocaine started appearing in a purer, crystallized form, its popularity skyrocketed. By the 1970s, the demand was booming, and Griselda saw a chance to corner the market. She ditched marijuana and set her sights on the new gold rush. Here is where Griselda's ruthlessness and ingenuity truly came together. Smuggling massive quantities of cocaine across borders wasn't easy, and traditional methods were risky. So, Griselda decided to get creative. She purchased an undergarment business. On the surface, it was a seemingly innocent move, but beneath that facade lurked a genius plan. Griselda transformed this business into a front for a daring smuggling operation. She designed and manufactured a whole line of custom-made bras and girdles with hidden pockets. They were the perfect disguise for her drug smugglers to carry their illicit cargo across borders. Griselda even opened a manufacturing facility back in Medellin, Colombia, to ensure a steady supply of her ingenious smuggling undergarments. Griselda's ambition didn't stop there. She understood the power of collaboration. Instead of fighting over territory and resources with other drug traffickers, she pooled resources and shared risks. This innovative approach, spearheaded by Griselda, would eventually become the foundation of the infamous Medellin cartel. While Pablo Escobar would later become its most notorious leader, the groundwork for the cartel's rise to power was laid in no small part by Griselda Blanco's vision and ruthlessness. Griselda Blanco's reign of terror. Griselda and Alberto's narcotics empire boomed and turned them into major players. Money flowed like water, but this success did not go unnoticed. The sheer volume of drugs they were moving attracted the unwanted attention of the FBI. In April 1975, the hammer fell. Griselda, along with 30 of her associates, were indicted on federal drug conspiracy charges. Facing the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, Griselda didn't hesitate. She grabbed her family and fled to Colombia, seeking refuge in her homeland. Colombia provided a temporary escape, but Griselda wasn't built to lay low for long. The allure of the American drug trade remained strong. In the late 1970s, she made a bold decision. It was time to return to the United States. Miami, a city already grappling with a wave of violent crime, became her new base of operations. At the time, cocaine had surged even more in popularity, surpassing marijuana as the drug of choice. This period, known as the Miami Drug War, was a battleground for ruthless traffickers vying for control. Griselda, ever the opportunist, waded right in. She wasted no time establishing a massive narcotics ring. At its peak, this criminal enterprise was reportedly moving 3,400 pounds of cocaine every month. The profits were astronomical. By the late 1970s, at the height of her power, Griselda was reportedly raking in $80 million a month. Her wealth was legendary, and everyone, it seemed, wanted a piece of the pie. The United States Drug Enforcement Administration estimated she had 600 people on her payroll, all working tirelessly to keep the cocaine flowing. But Griselda ruled with a fist of iron. She maintained her dominance through fear. Violence was her weapon of choice, a brutal tool she used to eliminate rivals, punish those who crossed her, and ensure her debts were always collected. Reports suggested she was responsible for a significant portion of South Florida's murders from 1979 to 1981. For a time, Griselda lived a life of unparalleled luxury. Her wealth brought her comfort, security, and a sense of invincibility. However, as the saying goes, power tends to attract enemies, and with great riches came the ever-present threat of those who coveted her fortune and her power. Griselda Blanco and Pablo Escobar's deadly rivalry. One of Griselda's rivals was a name that would soon become synonymous with the cocaine trade: Pablo Escobar, the king of cocaine. Despite Griselda's early support for him, Escobar had become a major thorn in her side. Escobar also saw her not just as a competitor, but as a genuine threat to his own burgeoning empire. The simmering tension between them finally boiled over, erupting into a full-blown war. Griselda and Escobar became locked in a deadly game of cat and mouse, each deploying their own network of assassins in a desperate bid to eliminate the other. Unfortunately for Griselda, the odds were stacked against her. While she was embroiled in a brutal turf war, Escobar was strategically consolidating his power. He was building a vast cartel in Colombia, one that would soon dominate the global cocaine trade. The FBI was also hot on Griselda's trail, putting her under immense pressure. It was a waiting game, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before one of them emerged victorious. The Black Widow. By now, cracks were beginning to appear in Griselda's seemingly impenetrable empire. Remember Alberto Bravo, her second husband? Well, things had soured between them before she even returned to the United States. Griselda had accused Alberto of stealing millions from their drug enterprise, while Alberto wasn't shy about criticizing her growing arrogance. He believed her godmother persona had inflated her ego. Their accusations spiraled into a vicious confrontation that ended in a deadly gunfight. Griselda wasn't one to back down. She faced off against Alberto, armed with a pistol, while he wielded a powerful Uzi submachine gun. The fight was brutal and bloody. In the end, Alberto and 6 of his bodyguards lay dead, while Griselda walked away with only a minor gunshot wound to the abdomen. Alberto's death cemented the image of Griselda as the Black Widow, a woman who got rid of her husbands by killing them. Following this bloody episode, Griselda married again. This time her husband was Dario Sepulveda. They even had a son together, and here's where Griselda's flamboyant personality shone through. Griselda's embrace of the godmother persona extended even to her son's name. He was christened Michael Corleone, a clear reference to the powerful mafia Don Vito Corleone from her favorite film, The Godfather. However, Griselda's new marriage wasn't destined for happily ever after either. In 1983, Sepulveda left her and returned to Colombia, taking their son Michael with him. The reason for their separation remains unclear, but reports suggest a bitter custody battle. Griselda, unwilling to be separated from her son, resorted to drastic measures. She reportedly paid to have Sepulveda assassinated in Colombia, ensuring Michael's return to the United States. This ruthless act further solidified Griselda's reputation as a woman who stopped at nothing to get what she wanted. Blood on the streets. As we mentioned before, violence wasn't just a side effect of Griselda Blanco's drug empire, it was the very foundation upon which it was built and maintained. It acted as the oil that kept the engine of her network running smoothly, but it also had a devastating side effect. It transformed Miami into a bloody battleground during the drug wars. One particular public display of this brutality occurred on July 11, 1979. 2 gunmen, believed to be acting on Blanco's orders, stormed a liquor store in Miami's Dadeland Mall and gunned down a rival cocaine dealer and his bodyguard in broad daylight. This brazen act sent a chilling message to anyone who dared to challenge Griselda's dominance. Another incident in Miami showcased the horrifying lengths Griselda was willing to go to. She reportedly ordered the murder of Jesus Castro, an associate who had apparently mistreated one of her children. However, the hitmen she hired in 1982 tragically made a terrible mistake. Instead of killing Castro, they accidentally shot and killed his 2-year-old son, Johnny. According to reports from Jorge Ayala, one of Griselda's assassins, her reaction to the news was shockingly cold. While initially angry that they missed their intended target, Griselda was said to have expressed satisfaction upon learning about the death of Johnny. The DEA's hunt for Griselda Blanco, the public execution at Dadeland Mall, and the horrifying mistake with Jesus Castro's son not only instilled fear, but also sowed seeds of discord. The hit on Jesus Castro, especially, was one of several acts of violence that turned other members of the Colombian cartel against Griselda. One such enemy was particularly determined. He was the nephew of her own second husband, Alberto Bravo. This young man burned with a desire for revenge, fueled by the lingering anger over his uncle's death years earlier. The situation became so volatile that the United States Drug Enforcement Administration was forced to temporarily put their investigation into Griselda on hold. Their priority became taking Alberto's nephew off the streets before he could act on his vendetta and potentially ruin years of painstaking investigation. One of the DEA agents most determined to bring down Griselda was Bob Palombo. He had been relentlessly pursuing her for the better part of the 1970s. However, Griselda wasn't an easy target. She was a master of disguise, a chameleon who could transform herself at will. She possessed the uncanny ability to gain or lose weight rapidly, alter her hair color on a whim, and project entirely different personas. One moment, she could be the epitome of Colombian elegance, radiating an aura of power and wealth. Next, she could blend seamlessly into the background, appearing as an unassuming, middle-aged American housewife. However, by 1983, the tide began to turn against Griselda. A combination of factors, including luck, informants within her own organization, and most importantly, the actions of two particular women, would ultimately lead to her downfall, the tip that turned the tide. When luck finally smiled on the DEA's Miami office in their pursuit of Griselda, it arrived in the form of a frantic call from a worried mother. The story she gave was that her very young and beautiful daughter was inexplicably dating a Hispanic-looking drug dealer who showered her with extravagant gifts and seemingly endless cash. This tip, seemingly insignificant at first, turned out to be the first major break in the Griselda case since the 1970s. The mysterious drug dealer, upon further investigation, turned out to be none other than Blanco, Griselda's own son. This revelation sent a jolt through the DEA. It was clear Griselda's sons were now deeply involved in the drug business. The break with Blanco's connection was just the beginning. 6 months later, another stroke of luck emerged with the arrest of Geraldo Gomez, a Colombian national desperate to remain in the United States for his American-born son. Agent Bob Palombo name-dropped Griselda Blanco during Gomez's interrogation. It was a tactic driven more by instinct than anything else. This seemingly random action proved to be a masterstroke. Facing a 10-year prison sentence and deportation, Gomez cracked. Not only did he recognize the name, but he also revealed he had a personal connection to the Blanco family. Back in Colombia, Gomez had operated a mechanic shop, servicing Griselda's vehicles and even turbocharging motorcycles for her son Osvaldo. As if that wasn't enough, Gomez revealed that his cousin was, at that very moment, romantically involved with Dixon Blanco, another one of Griselda's sons living in San Francisco. This unexpected connection provided the DEA with a crucial lead, a potential way to infiltrate Blanco's inner circle. Seizing this opportunity, Palombo offered Gomez a deal: witness protection in exchange for his cooperation. Gomez, facing a difficult choice, ultimately agreed. His testimony and information proved invaluable, and he disappeared into a new life. This wouldn't be the last break for the DEA. In the coming months, others like Max Mermelstein, a Jewish-American smuggler who pioneered the cocaine pipeline between Medellin and Miami, would also come forward. However, Mermelstein eventually found himself on the wrong side of the cartel after a $3 million bounty was placed on his head. He vanished into thin air, joining the ranks of those who chose witness protection over a violent demise. With each new informant, the noose around Griselda Blanco's operation tightened, and the walls began to close in. The kiss of justice. With each passing day, Griselda's paranoia escalated. The relentless pressure from law enforcement and the ever-present threat of rival hitmen forced her to flee Miami. She sought refuge in California, hoping to evade capture. However, the DEA's pursuit never wavered. Years of investigation had finally paid off, and they were determined to bring Griselda to justice. On February 17, 1985, she was finally arrested. This arrest was a personal triumph for Agent Palombo, who had relentlessly pursued Griselda for years. He had famously promised his fellow agents that he would seal her arrest with a kiss, and true to his word, upon entering Griselda's California residence, Palombo did plant a kiss on her cheek. With a touch of theatricality, he declared, "Hola, Griselda, we finally meet." Griselda's capture sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. The DEA considered it a major coup, ranking it above the arrests of other notorious figures like Leroy Nicky Barnes, the leader of a massive New York drug ring, or Wayne Akbar Prey, a powerful head of a nationwide trafficking organization. Even George Marquardt, a chemist responsible for over 120 overdose deaths with a potent synthetic opioid, couldn't compete with the significance of taking down Griselda. Griselda's trial, held in New York City during June and July of 1985, was a tense affair. While the prosecution aimed to paint a picture of a ruthless drug kingpin, Griselda's defense team countered by portraying her as a shrewd businesswoman caught in a web of circumstance. Despite their efforts, the jury found her guilty on one count of conspiracy to manufacture, import, and distribute cocaine. While it wasn't the sweeping victory the DEA had perhaps envisioned, it resulted in a hefty sentence, 15 years in prison. However, this seemingly clear-cut ending was far from the final chapter in Griselda Blanco's story. Griselda's escape plan. Imprisonment did little to quell Griselda's fiery spirit. Confined behind bars, she wasn't content with simply serving her time. Instead, she hatched a daring escape plan. This plan, as outrageous as it sounds, involved her loyal followers within the cartel, her foot soldiers as they were called. Griselda's audacious plot centered around the kidnapping of John F. Kennedy Jr., the son of the late President John F. Kennedy. The idea was to leverage his abduction, holding him hostage in exchange for her own release. Thankfully, this outlandish plan never came to fruition. While Griselda schemed in prison, her absence from the streets did little to slow down her rivals. In fact, it arguably benefited them. With the godmother out of the picture, they faced less competition and seized the opportunity to expand their own drug empires. Ironically, prison might have been the safest place for Griselda. Miami homicide detective Nelson Andreu, reflecting on her capture, expressed surprise that she hadn't been targeted sooner. The sheer number of enemies she had made, the lives she had shattered, it was a ticking time bomb. In the ruthless world of drug trafficking, violence was a currency readily spent, and Griselda had amassed a hefty debt. It was only a matter of time before someone sought to settle the score. Betrayal and Scandal. 9 years into her sentence, a new chapter unfolded in Griselda's life. She was indicted for a fresh set of charges, the murders of 2-year-old Johnny Castro and drug dealers Alfredo and Grisel Lorenzo. These charges were particularly serious, and a conviction could potentially lead to the death penalty. Griselda was extradited back to Miami to face these new accusations. The prosecution's case hinged heavily on the testimony of Jorge Ayala, Griselda's former hitman. Ayala had turned against his former employer and agreed to cooperate with the prosecution, providing crucial details about Griselda's drug trafficking operation, her involvement in murders, and her use of intimidation tactics. His testimony was vital in securing a conviction. However, a bizarre twist of events threw the entire case into jeopardy. While Griselda awaited trial, Ayala became embroiled in a curious scandal. He reportedly developed an inappropriate phone relationship with two secretaries working at the Miami-Dade State Attorney's Office. These phone calls, allegedly of an adult nature, weren't the only questionable activity. Ayala also sent these secretaries money orders, further muddying the waters. This questionable behavior raised serious red flags about Ayala's credibility. With the star witness now compromised, the prosecution's case began to crumble. It was suspected that Ayala may have deliberately sabotaged himself, fearing retaliation from Griselda's remaining associates if he testified against her. Faced with a weakened case, prosecutors were forced to make a difficult decision. In 1998, they offered Griselda a plea deal. She ultimately pleaded guilty to 3 counts of second-degree murder, which was a lesser charge compared to the initial accusations. This plea deal resulted in a 20-year prison sentence, to be served concurrently with her existing sentence. Griselda's time behind bars wasn't without its challenges. A lifelong smoker, she suffered a heart attack in 2002. 2 years later, citing her ongoing health issues, she was granted compassionate release from prison. However, this release wasn't a return to freedom in the United States. Griselda was deported back to Colombia, the country where her journey in the drug trade had begun. Final chapter. Griselda Blanco wasn't just ruthless, she was cunning. She devised a chillingly effective assassination method that became her signature. The motorcycle drive-by. Her hitmen, acting on her orders, would roar up on motorbikes, guns blazing, taking down their targets before anyone could react. The speed and surprise of these attacks were devastatingly successful. This tactic wasn't just efficient, it instilled fear. It became so notorious that rival drug lords themselves began using the very same technique Griselda pioneered, spreading the violence even further. Ironically, this same tactic would come full circle decades later when it was used to assassinate Griselda herself. Back in Colombia, after her deportation, Griselda tried to disappear into a life of anonymity. Her youngest son even claimed she had undergone a dramatic transformation, becoming a devout Christian. But her dark past cast a long shadow. Then, on a seemingly ordinary day, September 3, 2012, fate played its twisted hand. Griselda, accompanied by her pregnant daughter-in-law, went about her errands. They stopped at a butcher shop, filling bags with $150 worth of meat. As they emerged, a middle-aged man materialized from nowhere. He stepped off a waiting motorbike and approached Griselda with a chilling purpose. In a heartbeat, 2 fatal shots were fired. The world seemed to stand still as the man calmly walked back to his motorbike and sped away. Griselda crumpled to the ground, life draining from her with every passing moment. The terrified daughter-in-law could only cradle Griselda's head and place a Bible on her chest. At 69 years old, Griselda Blanco, the woman who had orchestrated countless deaths, finally succumbed to the very violence she had unleashed upon others. Her final resting place lies in the Jardines Montesacro Cemetery. It is the same burial ground as her notorious rival, Pablo Escobar. They may have been adversaries in life, but in death, they share a cold and permanent peace. The Blanco Sons. At this point, you might be wondering what became of Griselda's sons. Well, the Blanco family tree, much like Griselda's life, was tangled in violence and the drug trade. Her sons, particularly the older ones, seemed destined to walk a similar path. Dixon, Uber, and Osvaldo, tragically, became entangled in the drug trade just like their mother. Following in her footsteps, they became traffickers themselves. This dangerous career choice ultimately landed all 3 of them behind bars, and they faced federal prison sentences around the same time as Griselda. After their release, they attempted to rebuild their lives back in Colombia. Sadly, this fresh start was cut short. Just as fate would catch up with Griselda years later, it didn't spare her sons. Both Uber and Osvaldo met violent ends in Colombia. Dixon's fate is shrouded in some mystery. While reports suggest he too perished, some sources claim he may still be alive, or at least managed to outlive his mother. Griselda's youngest son, Michael Corleone Blanco, took a different path initially. However, even he couldn't fully escape the shadow his family cast. In 2011, he was arrested on charges of cocaine trafficking. Thankfully, he was able to turn things around, completing his probation in 2018. Michael has stepped into the spotlight in recent years. He participated in the VH1 series Cartel Crew, a program that explores the lives of children and relatives of notorious drug lords. He has also channeled his experiences into a clothing and lifestyle brand called Pure Blanco. The name choice is an interesting one, perhaps a way to reclaim the Blanco name, or a nod to his complicated family history. In January 2024, a Netflix drama series titled Griselda premiered, starring Sofia Vergara as the drug queen Pin. However, the show's creation wasn't without controversy. Michael Blanco filed a lawsuit against Netflix and Vergara, claiming the showrunners used his likeness without permission. While he sought to temporarily block the series' release, his efforts were unsuccessful and the show went ahead as planned. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.